HRBC show called Let's Talk. So, if you didn't know, this month is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And today we have survivor and ending human trafficking advocate, Tanya Gould. Welcome. And would you like to tell us a little about yourself and why this topic is important to you?
Absolutely. It's hard to tell a little bit about myself, right? But I am definitely a humanitarian at heart, and my interest my entire career has always been about building bridges and finding gaps in networks and systems, and just trying my best to make sure that people like myself who have been through vulnerable or hard and challenging situations that can be vulnerable to a lot of things, that we have the best chance at life too. So for myself, I have been through a lot of situations that, where I was a victim of something multiple times. Child sexual abuse, CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material, spiritual abuse through a cult or a church cult, trafficking. I'm a survivor of human trafficking, all types of abuses, as a child and young adult. And then when I tried to, get on my feet and, trying to find supportive services was really difficult. And so that's what I've done. My whole career is, I never forgot where I've come from, and I've done my best to make sure I'm connecting services with people, making sure people get what they need in order to get on their feet.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So, what are some things people should be aware of when it comes to being coerced into the life of being trafficked?
Well, one thing, that I like to always talk about is, just like I just shared with you, a lot of my vulnerabilities, right? Like, or a lot of things that happen were vulnerabilities, right? Okay. And that's what traffickers look for. Anyone who's looking to exploit you because they think, you're underserved, underprivileged, you're not in a space where you could think for your own or for yourself. You don't have um, good, like, supervisory situations, right, as a child or as a young adult. And so people take advantage of this all the time, especially predators. So when it comes to what people should look out for, it's definitely understanding that traffickers and, predators, or people who are looking for kids who are unsupervised, uncared for, not connected to services and community. You know, kids are already vulnerable because they're young, right?
Yeah.
So now think of kids who are vulnerable because they're young but don't have adequate supervision, right? And so, and it could be any, it doesn't matter what community you're from. A lot of people can say, well, my community is safe, it's a gated community, but, now there's just a ton of access kids have online, right? So we have
Yeah.
situations where when I was little, we were only allowed to play on the streets, and everyone knew everyone in the neighborhood. Was not like that anymore. We don't even know our neighbors, you know. And so kids have access, the kind of access we never had.
Yeah.
So that takes a different type of parenting,
Yeah.
a different type of supervision. And so parents need to, instead of saying, oh, I'm gonna just let this happen, there's a new way of parenting and oversight that you have to do on your kids.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So, as a citizen who suspects they have come across someone being trafficked, what can they do?
So if you see something, say something. A lot of people are afraid that they're wrong, they're not right.
Yeah.
So they're kind of afraid to report something, but it's not your job. That's not your job to decide if I'm right or wrong. Your job is to report a suspicion, right? And
Yeah.
by now, if you think about it, we all pretty much know when there's like a domestic abuse situation, or we think we're seeing a drug transaction, or our gut tells us something is wrong. This is the same exact thing. When you see something that looks suspicious, is not okay, you can dial #77, which is our Virginia State Police. Our Virginia State Police now has a human trafficking unit. So #77, you can dial the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and they will make sure that you will get connected to the authorities in your area, but you can leave an anonymous suspicion report, National Human Trafficking Hotline, or you can call the local, your local community police. And so, but it's just the more because there's this uh, idea that we have, right? That we're not sure if this is prostitution or this is trafficking, because I've seen this and now people say it's trafficking. I'm confused. And, I want people who have that thought to think about this, right? Who wants to sell their selves for money? Like who wakes up in the morning and say, I'm happy to sell my body in exchange for money, right? And people who are doing this, there's a reason behind it, right? It's not something that they're doing because um, perhaps they don't have any other choice, right? Meaning they've seen this in the culture and it seems to be accepted by the culture, because that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
When we look at communities of color, this is more of a culture thing, right? This is something our kids, I mentor kids at our local children's hospital that come in and they're identified as being trafficked. And, you know, the fact that they're okay with this, like they think this is okay, is wrong.
Yeah.
That's wrong, because there's so much more, our kids could be doing than posting ads online and getting paid for them, thinking that that's what makes them have value. Right. So this is generational, this is cultural. And we as adults who supervise this, there are a lot of families, and families of color specifically, because these are the groups that I work more with, who allow this to happen. Just like when we're talking about sexual abuse, right? Sexual abuse has been allowed to happen for generations. And, familial trafficking, meaning, kids who are brought up in households. And I've heard this, for generations. Well, I need to pay rent. And so this is what we do to make sure our rent is paid, or families who are drug users, so when kids grow up in this environment and they see this, it becomes normal. And the best thing you can do in a situation like that is to do your best to make it fun, right? Do your best to make it seem like this is the thing to do, right? That it doesn't
Yeah.
bother you because you're strong and it doesn't matter anyway, right? So these are things that, we need to be talking about in our community, especially the community of color, to let our girls and our guys know that pimping and hoeing is not us. That
Yeah.
does not have to be our story. We
Yeah.
don't have to go down like that.
Yeah. And we also have a problem with, um, not being able to tell. Like you tell your mother, you tell your father, and they tell you, don't tell nobody else. So now you're stuck with a secret and it just boils in you and boils in you.
Which is why I tell my story. That's why. It's why I do it. Because there's
Well, I
such
appreciate it.
shame in it. In many cultures, there's shame in telling what happened to you. It's like you're snitching on your family or your friends. But then you have to go through this whole lifetime, with, maybe I'll heal from this or not. Right. So, it's time to speak up. It's time to say this is happening to me and it's not okay. It's time to understand your value and worth, and how important you are. And it's important to do that, because the more we speak up about it, the more we tell our story, right? The
Mhm.
more it'll expose it, right? It is going to expose because we were silent about it for so long is why, this kept happening. The silence perpetuated this into our systems, into the way we do things now, because of the silence. So speaking out and saying this happened to me, speaks against the person who did it to you. Because I remember thinking for myself, having come through all of this trauma, like, why is it okay for me to carry the shame and guilt that was put on me? I'm the victim.
Yeah.
I should be supported and valued and loved and given access to healing and what it means to have freedoms and rights and justice, not the opposite.
Yeah.
So when we see that switch, but then that's where we can be more empowered. But it takes for people to start speaking up about things like this. So that's why I speak up about it, and I tell the truth about it. I say, if you don't want me to tell the truth about something, then don't tell me or show me something that's wrong, because I'm gonna tell. I'm that person. Is keeping secrets is not okay. And so
Yeah.
that's one thing, parents can talk to their kids about, secrets, share secrets that their friends say. They don't want to get their friends in trouble. A lot of people, and sometimes people say, well, if you if you say what happened to you, then that person can go to jail or you can get justice, and it'll stop that person from hurting someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And sometimes that helps someone, say something. So, but yeah, so parents need to really have, closer relationships with their kids, get involved, see what they're doing on their social media, and report any suspicion. You see ads, or you see your kids' friends posting ads, so don't just look at it and be like, she a mess. Mm-mm. If your child shows you something about somebody else and you see that, you report it, period. Because that's the only way we're going to get ahead of this.
True. So true. Okay. So, what are some resources for people who believe they are stuck in that life that will help them get out?
So if you're stuck in this, the best thing, honestly, because who knows where you are, is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and that's 888-373-7888. That number is connected to, victim service providers all across the country, law enforcement. And so that's a great number to call, great space to call. If
What's the
you,
number again?
it's
Sorry.
888
Uh huh.
373 7888.
7888. And it's the national
Human trafficking
hotline.
hotline. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they can call that number and they will help you. You let them know what's going on, and then they'll, surround you with services or information or whatever it is that you need. If you are in the situation, or if you know someone who's in the situation, then you call them. Yep.
Okay. All right. So, what is being done on the state level to help with this problem?
Well, so education is key, right?
Okay.
So we're looking to make sure we're working towards making sure, like, emergency rooms, right? Physicians in medical facilities and emergency rooms, that they have the proper training. We're also looking at universities, and, schools, and law enforcement. So not just training, but what to do when you think you see it. Because, you know, a lot of people do see something, right? And so it's sometimes you're not sure what to do about it. Like I said, when I first came on. So what we're also working on is aligning all of our efforts with Virginia State Police and the resources there to make sure that our whole state, will have, you can dial pound 77, like I said before. You want to report a tip, that's the best number to call to report a tip in our state. And now, there's a more aligned collaborative response, right? And so we're also, wanting to make sure that everyone is trauma informed. What that means is just, understanding that everyone has a backstory. So and just kind of being in that space, when you're with someone that, you know you just can't assume that this person, like I said, with prostitution, right? And you're thinking, society told you this about prostitution. And, as a law enforcement person or a medical personnel, you're seeing someone that you feel like is prostituting, and then you treat them disrespectfully. That's not being, you shouldn't treat people like that anyway. But understanding that people are in their situations for a reason. You don't know the backstory, but it's important to honor and respect them in the space that they're in. Listen and make sure you know what your area resources are so you can resource out appropriately. And so these are things that we are getting in line, with the hotel training, that staff the hotels, that they know what to look for, and working with our other agencies like DCJS and, for training and doing a ton of training around the state. And so just getting everybody on the same page. What we do at the Attorney General's office, we have, small little workshop meetings so we can talk to people who are actually doing the work, right? Instead of just coming up with these grand ideas, right? So we actually talk to the people who are doing the work and say, hey, what can we do better? What are we missing? What should we be having conversations about? Because when you think about human trafficking around the state, our state is very diverse. We have a military community. And so that's one type of training, not just how to identify, but how the military, personnel involve themselves in trafficking. So, trafficking happens within military communities. So so that's one training, right? And then we have training on like the intersection between drugs and gang activity and human trafficking. Like a ton of that happens in Northern Virginia, right? And then think of like southwestern part of Virginia where, you have the trucking industry, right? So human trafficking is going to look different out there. And then think over here in Hampton Roads, we are a tourist area where tourism happens. And so human trafficking is going to look different here. So to help people around the state understand human trafficking and how it looks in their backyard and their community is important. So that's, something that we're, just really working to get out. Education is key right now. And so getting everyone on the same page. We also support and use the Blue campaigns outreach. Maybe you'll see like on YouTube or different social media outlets and commercials. The Blue campaign has now started putting out little scenarios, of someone who's being lured or groomed into being trafficked. So people can see what this looks like. So when they see someone that looks like they're prostituting, they have the backstory, and they understand it more. And that's really all it is helping people understand when they see it, that it's not what you think it is. But if the person you see, whether it's labor or sex trafficking, if they can't get up in the morning and decide to do something totally different with their lives without threat or the thought of someone hurting them because they decided to do something different, right? Then that person doesn't have control over what they do, right? They don't have control over their lives, and that's not okay. We live in America. We should have choice. as to, how we um, how we move and live, right, and have our being, right. And so that's a human right. And so yeah, so that's where we are, like when you think about as a state, we want to make sure that education is first and awareness, and that we have the capacity for victims when they're coming in so that they can become survivors. We don't want victims to stay victims. We want them to go through the healing process. So working on building capacity within our state to make sure that once folks are identified, they can begin their healing process.
Okay. So like our state has like a task force with the attorney general, right? So what does that task force consist of?
So the state doesn't have one yet, a statewide one. What we have as a state is the Virginia State Police that started their human trafficking unit called Fusion.
Okay.
Fusion. So that's on the state side where they've started this. So, but it's still not a task force. It's okay. So that's one thing. The other is here in Hampton Roads, we have a regional task force. And so the regional task force is a work between federal, state, and local law enforcement. And what they do is work together for like identification purposes, investigation, and prosecutorial. And so everyone's working together through the whole process. And so, which includes service providers. And so when someone is identified, like say if someone calls the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the National Human Trafficking Hotline calls the task force. And then the task force takes the tip or whatever's going on, and we work together as a unit to help that person here in Hampton Roads. And this helps us continue to be relevant, continue to know what's happening on the ground. It gives us data and information on the types of trafficking that happens here in Hampton Roads, and it helps people not fall between the cracks because it's a regional task force. And so our federal partners, the federal government has the capacity, they have the funds to do this work. And so the partnership between the federal and our state and local is the important piece, because our state and local get to learn, from the federal government how to do this work. And so that's the partnership that we are seeing here in the Hampton Roads area. So it's the only task force that's working in this way here in our state. There are other small coalitions which has, their smaller units, because human trafficking is happening and they have to do something. They have to build, a team. But we are like grant funded and working out of the Attorney General's office to make sure that, traffickers get locked up and, but we do this and get the experience that we need in order to do it as a state. So.
Okay. So if anybody in the audience has a question, feel free to ask. But my last question is, if you met the young you today, what advice would you give yourself?
If I met young me, like last year young, or no, just playing. So when asked that question, I usually think, because I don't regret anything, because I enjoy where I am today, and I love that I have purpose. Not that I wouldn't have purpose if I had not gone through so much trauma, but to be in a space where I get to work with people who have trauma, or, work with people who've gone through what I've gone through. I love that, because there's nothing like, I don't know about you, but I know for me, going through the things that I've gone through, when I found someone that went through some of the same things I went through, and they made it, is so inspiring, right? It's like, it shows me, that I can, and I like being that person. I like being, a a face of what it means to be whole, right? To come through so many challenges. And so, what I would tell my younger self would be to trust more what's happening on the inside, because a lot of times, as I was, whether it was a good situation or I'm trying to get on my feet, or whether it was a bad situation, or I'm trying to get on my feet, I didn't always, because of what happened to me, because of all the trauma, it was so hard to trust. And I would have been a lot further in my healing process had
Mhm.
I just trusted a little more, when people are trying to help, or just even my gut telling me no or yes. A lot of times I was right. I was right. But I was afraid to believe myself because of my past, because of what, certain things that happened in my past. So it would be, remembering that it's going to be okay. Like, you're going to be fine. You know, you're going to be fine. You're not going to die. It's okay. You
Mhm.
know, that type of encouragement, you know.
Okay. Well, those are all the questions that I have, and I don't see any social media questions. So, is there anything else you would like to tell us?
I mean, if you, I know a lot of people like to know how can they get involved, and I like to tell people you can get involved right at home. You can um, teach your kids that buying sex is not okay. Buying sex, teaching kids that their identity is not in their sexuality.
So,
That's-
when you say that,
mhm.
how?
Because that says that my identity, who I am, is based around um, my genitals,
Yeah, but
right?
how do I go about that? How do I, like, say somebody really isn't that comfortable with sexuality? How do they go about instilling in a child that
Well, they need
you're
to get
more than
comfortable.
your you're
Kids,
more than
so
your
you know
genitals?
what? You know what? That I love that you said that. Traffickers and buyers of sex, they talk about sex.
Mhm.
Have no problem talking about it, but it's in an unhealthy way. So if parents don't talk to their kids about sex in a healthy way, kids are going to learn about it. They
Yeah.
are going to learn. So, me as a parent, knowing my background, I was very open and honest with my kids about sex, about sexuality, about just who they are as human beings, aside from having sex, right? That's all kids are talking about and thinking about. I kept my kids busy with other aspects of who they are.
Mhm.
Sex is something you get to do and enjoy, but it's not all of you,
Yeah.
right? Don't land yourself in your sexuality, right? So, what is it that you aspire to do? What do you love to do? What do you dream about? What are you thinking about? Like really pulling those things out of your kids so that sex isn't the thing that's on their mind all the time, because that's what you're seeing on social media and entertainment. That's all we're talking about is sex. Like, that's the only thing available. And so, yeah, so that's what I mean, like wrapping yourself in your sexual identity, or like identifying yourself, in this way, I feel like is limiting, and it doesn't speak to who you are as a person, as a human
Yeah.
being, and how valuable and amazing you are on this planet. And this is your moment. Like, you live, you're born, you live, and you die. What are you going to do? And who are you going to be remembered as? Like, how are you going to be remembered? Are you going to leave a legacy? And what is that going to look like when people say your name? Are they going to remember you? Are you going to, like, what is your footprint going to be while you're here? What is that going to look like? right? I don't want them to remember me. And for me, sex is personal. It's very personal for me, right? It's
Mhm.
personal. I don't. It's not anyone's business but mine, right? So
Yeah.
I don't want to be remembered by that. I want to be remembered about my potential. Like what is my potential being a human being here on this planet? Why am I here? Where did I come from and where am I going? Like to me, you know, spending time thinking about those things um, is just amazing. I remember as I was healing, I would be talking to people and people were like, "Oh my God, you helped me! You made me, you inspired me," and I would get a little jealous. I'm like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
I want to, like I am amazing, but I need to be that for myself. I need to know myself. I need to know my potential. Like, you know, who can I be? What can I do? And those are all only you can answer those questions for yourself. You can't answer that for me. You got your own life. You have to
Yeah.
figure that out for yourself. If you haven't figured it out already, that's not my job to tell you, right? It's your
Yeah.
job to figure that out for you. And so yeah, so that is my thing, my soapbox on where I see our society right now and how all of that is it's such a predators and exploiters, that's what they're looking for, people who are unsure about who they are. But if you're
Mhm.
confident and you are like looking at who you are, then and looking for that for yourself, then that takes you out of the equation because no one can really exploit you because you're minding your business and you're taking care of yourself. You see what I'm saying? But when you put yourself out there and you're unsure and you're looking for somebody to tell you that you're valuable and you're important, and you need that affirmation and you need that confirmation from others, traffickers look for that. That's what they want because they don't have a problem with giving you what you think that you need. And then when they get you, they turn that on you. And that's why coercion is in the definition when it comes to a person being trafficked. Because that's what they do. They coerce you.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and giving us all this good stuff to think about and take to our families, to our children. And that is
Awesome.
all that I have.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. All right, audience. It was a pleasure.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.